Hey guys, it's HGhaleon here with another video review. This time around with Streets of Rage 4. Put about 6 hours into the game. It's not bad. It's not as high as people give the praise for. Like I've seen the reviews like 8 to 9 to even up to like 9.5s, which I don't agree with. It's definitely a good game. It's just not a great game, and I'm gonna explain why. First off, let's do the four categories like usual. Graphics, sound, gameplay, and fun factor. So let's start off with the graphics. Very pretty game. I love the sprite work. It's very high detailed. Lots of lighting effects. Lots of the backgrounds are really nice. It definitely feels like Streets of Rage when you're looking at it. It's a little different of an art style. It's not as as gritty, but I still like how clean it looks. It still has that Streets of Rage identity. So the graphics department definitely knocks it out of the park. I have no problems with it whatsoever. Definitely one of the more high-end notes of the game. So I really don't have any complaints to say about the visuals. It looks really damn good. So nothing more to say on that. Again, good job. Like excellent graphics. Now let's get into the sound. The music, you can definitely hear some Streets of Rage tunes in some of the tracks. There are some tracks that really resonated with me. Mr. Y and Mr. and Mrs. Y were really awesome. I love that track. The ending boss song was great. Just a nice throwback to Mr. X. I love stage, I believe 6. It was the Chinese town. That was wow. That was a nice song. Really nice song. The first stage definitely does feel Streets of Ragey. I know you can hear some of Yuzo Koshiro's work in there. You can definitely tell it's him. But some other tracks didn't I mean, they weren't bad per se. Like they're good tracks. It's just they're not tracks I would constantly re-listen to. Like it doesn't have the same pull that Streets of Rage 2 had in terms of music. Even Streets of Rage 1. Those are headbangers. Like I think those just have aged better. These, they're good for a listen, but ultimately I'd rather still listen to 2, especially the Streets of Rage remake soundtrack. That was fucking phenomenal. Like that's a headbanger that you can constantly listen to and not get bored of it. But this track, it just didn't have the same level of pull that the Streets of Rage 2 was known for. And Streets of Rage 1 was awesome, and Streets of Rage 2 even built on it more. We don't talk about Streets of Rage 3. One of the worst things about that game was the soundtrack was utter garbage to me. Like, it just, ugh. You knew you were going to go into a bad time when you heard the character select music, and it was like, dun, 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 dun. And I was like, oh my god. Shoot me now. Like, what happened? I don't know where Yuzo Koshiro was at, but man, he was taking something. It wasn't the good stuff. But regardless, this isn't about Streets of Rage 3, but the music is, like I said, it's good. It's not great. It's good. It's good music. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool. Sound effects are pretty standard. You can definitely hear a lot of throwback to the original games. I noticed there's no dialogue at all in the game. There's no voice acting really outside the characters talking when they do their moves. Like I was kind of hoping the cutscenes were going to be voice acted. That would have been kind of cool, but they weren't. So I don't know. I felt that could have been done. Like there's certain things I wish they did do and didn't do. But as far as the sound department, yeah, I would have think the cutscenes with voice acting would have been a nice plus. But that's me. That's it for the sound department. Moving on into the gameplay territory. Here I'm kind of a mixed bag on. Like, I like some of the changes. I really do. First of all, the combo system is insane. I love it. I love all the bouncing on the wall, air attacks, air special moves. Like, oh my god, that's great. Like, they nailed it. Like, excellent. I can't really argue with that. That system is great. It's such a evolution from the previous game. So definitely kudos there. However, I do feel some gameplay elements took a step back, particularly the mobility options. Aside two characters having a form of run or dash, which I'm speaking of Cherry and Adam, nobody else can run as far as the original cast. So I don't. Them removing run just felt like the game got slower, and I was like, oh god, it kind of walks like a snail, and I kind of don't like that for a 2020 game. It feels slow. Like it just didn't feel like the movement didn't complement the pacing of the gameplay, especially with enemy movement. Enemies move like Streets of Rage 3 enemies, like really fast, really frantic, and then here you're moving like a snail, which you're working in a Streets of Rage 3 environment with a Streets of Rage 2 control scheme, with a Streets of Rage 2 moveset. So I don't get the decision in that. That to me feels awkward. I think running should have been in the game, and I think rolling should have been in the game. I don't understand what their decision was to change that. It just didn't feel right. There was something off. It feels like a step backwards in that department. Having Cherry have exclusively a run was, I think, a dumb decision, because it makes her so fucking broken. She's like the best character in the game, hands down, just because of her mobility. I think what they should have done is given everybody a run, but everybody has different run speeds. Obviously, a big character should not run as fast as like Cherry. She should be the fastest. Whereas a character like, Axel or Floyd should run a lot slower. They can still run, they just can't run as good. So I think they should have made that adjustment. Same thing with the rolling, the upward and downward rolling, because some enemy attacks, like if you don't move very fast up and down, so I feel like you can't avoid certain stuff very well, especially when enemies try to flank you on the higher difficulties. So I do feel like you get sandwiched too much. So I feel the roll would have been a nice addition. But I also noticed the way they did to complement that, I guess, is make enemies only hit you once. I noticed enemies don't really have any multi-attacks aside like a very few amount of enemies, like the Muay Thai guys. They're like one of the few that have a multi-hit attack. Everybody else is kind of just a one and done, which it just feels kind of weird. Because in the older Streets of Rage 2, even 3, the enemies had multi-hit attacks. But going into that, were actually one mechanic that really, I feel like, got weird, changed in a weird way, was the break mechanic, which is your special move. Your basically the get the fuck off me move. They strictly took out the break property of that. So when enemies used to hit you in 2 or 3, you would hit A in the middle of the attack string to break the attack so enemies couldn't combo you, which I thought was a good mechanic. You're sacrificing a little bit of life to get enemies to get off you. So that's a trade-off. You got hit. Now instead of you can take the full combo, or you could use the break move to get them off you, and then you just don't take as much damage, which I think was a good mechanic. I actually like the super meter mechanic, where there was a meter for that move. So if you used the move, you had to wait like 10 seconds or so, or 15 seconds to reuse it again at the without using life. If you used it outside that window, it made you sacrifice life to use it, which I thought was a neat system. I was like, okay, so it's a kind of like a almost like a burst. You get that one burst to get them off you, and then you gotta wait a while before you can use it again, unless you want to keep paying life to use it. I'm totally fine with that. I would probably adjust it so maybe it's not 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. So because it really shouldn't be a move that you cripple on, where you're just constantly waiting to use it. There should be some sort of penalty. So I think them extending the penalty on that would be nice, make the charge slower. And then again, if you keep spamming it, life will be lost as a result. That I believe that needs to change. Those 3 things are the main things that I don't like about the gameplay mechanics. If they added those 3 things, I think the gameplay would be much, much better, and it would feel like even more of an evolution than what it is now. Just the mobility on that game is just way too slow. There's other games that do it way faster. One game, honorable mention, that's really, really fucking good beat 'em up is Fight and Rage. Excellent beat 'em up. Lots of mobility options, crazy combos. There's parrying in the game, air juggles, cancels. Secret moves, like and there's they have multiple paths, which I'm going to get into in the fun factor end of it. So let me go ahead and skip that for later. So that's pretty much it with the gameplay. Like I said, it's good. Controls are fine. Like if your moves come out. Oh, one minor gripe. I hate how back attack is back and attack, or Y and Y. I think it's Y. Sorry, punch and jump, or punch and circle is your back attack. You can either hit back and attack or punch and circle together. I believe that's what it is. Don't quote me 100% on that, but I don't like the fact that back attack is back and attack, because sometimes I'm trying to do a throw, like if I'm hitting an enemy and I want to, do a back throw. Sometimes I'll back attack on accident, and I feel they should just leave it how it was, where the back attack is just 2 buttons. I think it just feels better. They need to adjust that. I don't like back and attack. It messes up in my opinion, some of the setup stuff. One minor gripe, that's it. But the other 3 things definitely need to be fixed. But overall, the controls are solid. They're not perfect, though. The gameplay needs a little bit more, a little bit beefed up to make it a little bit more up to code, in my opinion. Something, it needs to take a step forward. I felt like it took a step back in some ways. Too much nostalgia on Streets of Rage 2. Streets of Rage 3, I think, in my opinion, had a better control scheme, better mechanics. So 2 is just a little too old school, but that's me. And the last thing is the fun factor. The game is fun for a few times. The multiplayer is definitely where it's at. Playing 4 players and 2-player on co-op online and whatnot is awesome. That definitely is a big thing. However, after beating all 12 levels, I actually beat it on arcade mode. Actually beat the whole thing without continuing. And I beat story mode on hard. I actually placed really high on the rank too. I was number 6 in the ranking, which was pretty cool. I was like, yeah, I still got it. Anyways, the gameplay, the fun factor is, it's just, like, it's nice unlocking the classic characters and the retro music. That is really cool. But I felt the game was incomplete. It feels like they rushed it out, because I feel there's a lot of content that was missing that they could have thrown in the game. A couple examples. If you look at the artwork in the game, there's tons of enemy models that are listed that are not in the game. I counted 11. There's, I think, 9 or 8 normal enemies and 2 or 3 bosses that are not in the game. Which I was like, really? You don't have the boxer on the ship? He's a classic boss from 2. He's not in the game. The sisters, Orihime, and I forgot the other one, from Streets of Rage 3, they're not in the game. What the hell? Instead, we get, repeat bosses on a lot of levels, especially that one metal dude. I got sick of seeing him. He was 3 or 4 times. He kept showing up. I was like, okay, you're getting kind of old. I felt like he was just filler. He was constantly just being thrown in there when a different enemy could have taken his place. I would have been fine with him just as a normal enemy once in a while. But literally, I just felt like, oh, we need a mid-boss here, so we're just going to throw him in there. And they kept shoehorning him in a lot of levels. And it got a little old. I didn't like that. I think they should have expanded on the enemy roster. The enemy variety is not as great as it could have been. It's definitely not Streets of Rage status. Streets of Rage was just Streets of Rage remake status. Sorry. That was the way to do it. Holy shit, the enemy variety was insane on that game. And that's what I think they needed to aim for. So I felt like there's a lot of unused assets. They're playable characters. Why do we not have Streets of Rage 4 characters of Max inside a boss? He should be playable. Zen and Skate. Why are they're not Streets of Rage 4 models of them where you can play as them? Same thing with Shiva. We have Boss Shiva, but we can't play as Shiva. That would have been epic to have all those characters as playable characters, as unlocks. They didn't have to necessarily be in the story mode, but just to say, oh, you can play a Streets of Rage 4 version of these characters. That would have been sick. They would have had all 9 of those characters as selectable characters. I would have been like, oh yeah, that's freaking awesome. Aside, including the retro characters, which is a nice little throwback. I don't mind that. Not, to me, it's a bonus. It's not something that I really count as, oh yeah, that's the main part of the game. Now, the main, obviously, pull is the new mechanics, the new gameplay, the Streets of Rage 4 version of the characters. So I wanted to see the expanded roster. I really feel that they just kind of left a lot of stuff out. It just really feels like the game is not done. Also, again, I can't harp this enough, and I was mentioning this earlier about Fight and Rage. Why do we now have multiple paths? Streets of Rage Remake had tons of paths to take. That is completely gone from this game. Like, what the fuck happened? Like, the levels are so linear. Like, really, you can't have branching paths? That would have been sick. Like, have, like, you know, every level have, like, 2 paths, and those 2 paths bracket off into other 2 paths, and eventually they come full circle at the end. Or maybe you get a different ending, like, you have, like, 3 different endings. That would have been sick. Like, why didn't you guys do that? You said you just made it one linear level. I really think that, again, that took a step back compared to, like, you know, Streets of Rage Remake. They could have taken a lot of cues from that, because, in my opinion, Streets of Rage Remake is, like, a somewhat official title, I guess. I mean, it's not really official, but you get what I'm saying. Where it did the series justice. Like, it is worthy to be considered a legitimate title. Like, if Sega would have given their blessing and brought that out, people would have lost their shit and be like, oh my god, this is freaking amazing. Like, that's pushing the envelope. So, in terms of content and just overall, just inclusiveness of everything, I feel Streets of Rage Remake was way better than Streets of Rage 4. It's not a bad game, it's a good game, but it's not a great game. I see a lot of people reviewing the game saying it's like perfect, you know, like, oh, best beat 'em up ever made, or of the year, and I'm like, it's good. I played it, I enjoyed it, but I feel that it should have taken a little longer in the oven. I would have liked them to delay it another 6 months, or even a year, just to add all that extra stuff. Hell, even raise the price tag. If they would have added all the stuff I said and raised the price tag for $30, I would have gladly paid it. I think a lot of people would have too. They would have said, oh yeah, $30, take it. I would have been like, this is by far, it would have been the best Streets of Rage. Hands down. I would say, okay, Streets of Rage Remake has some competition. But nope, I just feel like they kind of left stuff out. It just doesn't feel like it's a finished game. It just feels like stuff was lost. And I'm a big Streets of Rage fan. I've been playing every single game since the beginning. So I have a very extensive history of it. I know the game series very well. But I think a lot of people have a misconception that Streets of Rage 3 is a terrible game. That's why the developers didn't want to put anything Streets of Rage 3 really in the game, because they feel like it was a blemish on the series for the wrong reasons. Streets of Rage 3, mechanically wise, was an excellent game. It's just, it had a lot of problems with the game. First, you know, I can mention the main things that Streets of Rage 3 did wrong. One was the bastardization of the translation. We got a terrible version of the game with an absolute garbage story. 2, the damage in that game from enemies was ridiculous. Like, enemies would hit you and you would die in just a few hits, and then you would do jack shit damage. That was another problem. I don't know what the hell was going on with the damage calculations, but it just felt really unbalanced. Another thing that sucked was the music. The music was absolute trash. Those are the reasons why it failed. But as far as mechanically how it played, it was actually a step forward. But people apparently think it's worse. I don't know why. So it's weird to me. To me, Streets of Rage 3 mechanically wise plays better than 2. 2 feels slow compared to 3. And Streets of Rage Remake feels better than even both of them. So, again, oh yeah, another thing that Streets of Rage 3 had and Remake had was the additional star moves, where you had like extra special moves, depending on how well you do. I think that would have been nice, like upgradable moves. Like, I mean, again, stuff's missing. Stuff is missing from the game. So, that's enough talk about it. Overall, I give the game a 7.5. It's not amazing. It's not bad. It's good. But I hope they correct the problems with an update, or make a DLC to add all that extra stuff that's missing. Like, charge like $5-10, add all that DLC. Oh man, it would redeem the game even better. It would definitely jump it up to like an 8.5. It would just be like, oh man, now it's really good. And hell, it might even hit the 9 territory. But as of now, I think it needs more. I think it's lacking. So, that's just my opinion. Thanks for everybody for watching. I'll be putting more videos up and streaming other games. Right now I've been playing some weird games, some Toho games. I play Streets of Rage 4, Trials of Mana. I might consider doing a review of Trials of Mana. That game is actually really underrated. Really recommend playing that game. I actually like it more than Final Fantasy VII from a gameplay perspective. So, But yeah, definitely follow my channel. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.